Okay, we're up to day 3, and if you look at that here, we've done Backpack Discover, and we're up to boots. So here's the drawing that I did for boots, and you can see the owner of this little stand, shoes and toys and stuff is us, is the name of it. He is selling a pair of boots, and now if you remember from yesterday, I talked about how the boots are kind of special. They're duck boots, the kind you'd see at in an LL Bean catalog, or on your own feet if you have a lot of money. Looking at the two figures here, the owner of the little stand here and his wife kind of peeking around the background, they may look pretty extreme. They're actually modeled off some finger puppets that I found on Amazon that I am looking to purchase. They're all the way on a slow boat from China to use in some of my films that will probably find their way onto this channel before too long. But they're very, very, very exaggerated, very funny, somewhere between grotesque and humorous. And you know what I'll do? I'll throw a couple pictures that I pulled off of Amazon into the video footage here so that you can see them for yourself. I'm pretty sure, like a lot of these toys from China, these especially these rubber toys, these old-fashioned, what used to be called by and they're still called by collectors, jigglers or finger puppets. Some are jigglers, some are finger puppets, some are something in between. I'm pretty sure they have an origin going back to the 60s or 70s, or at the very least the 80s. And by the way, if they look a little familiar to you, beyond the fact that they're, I modeled them after this toy, I think they are, either the toys themselves are modeled after some cartoony styles that may have shown up in some Warner Brothers cartoons or something of that ilk, or else some artists, because I definitely have seen this kind of style before I found these puppets. And just looking at my own work here, especially in that one, boy, that it's like right there on the tip of my memory. That's something I've seen besides in these puppets. We're going to actually be focusing on something else, though. We're going to come over here in this corner where you see a gorilla, which is held up with a nail, and it has a lid, not through its head or anything like that, but it has a little attached rope or string. And these are called jigglers. They were made in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s. They're still made for all I know. I had one. In fact, that's why I chose that. That gorilla right there, I believe I had the Imperial version of it, like La Da Da Da. I had the name brand from Hong Kong. The larger one, it was one of my favorite toys. I can still, if I kind of, let myself go back into the recesses of my memory, I can still remember the tactile sensation, the feel of that thing. It was rubber, but it had like the rubber was not solid. The skin was made of like crisscross, almost like, and if you look at my drawing there, almost like cross hatching of rubber, so that and with little pockets in between them, like a honeycomb effect is kind of what I'm looking for. It had such a distinct feel, and it was loose and jiggly, and if you grabbed it and shook it like a doll, it would move all over the place. It was just a fun toy, and there weren't a lot of action figures back then when I was a little kid. Not like today. And that one, even though it wasn't technically an action figure, boy, it went through the ropes. It played a lot of roles in the movies that I played in my head and on the floor of my bedroom with other toys. It was a big part in it. So we're going to honor him today. We're going to do that. So what are we going to do with this little figure? Well, we're going to go back to our Underground book, right? The Apex Treasury of Underground Comics. And by the way, this is not kid friendly. Okay, if you're thinking about purchasing this for yourself or for your son or daughter, a child, you've got to be aware of that. This is not, I repeat, not kid-friendly. Okay, one of the features of the Underground artists, we're talking about the features of their art styles, but if you want to talk a little bit more about the features of the content, it is very, not sexually themed wouldn't be the right word, almost deviant. So just be aware of that. I'm a fan of the art, but that's not something that you want to just purchase blindly and then open it up and go, oh my gosh, what did this guy in, the real atomic toy chest of doom steer me into? But I want to look at this panel right here. And if you look, we got a guy sitting here. I don't think it's Schumann, it's someone else, but he's sitting in an armchair. And what I want, I'm looking at a very specific area. He is not quite flush to the chair. He's sitting up in it just the slightest bit, and what that creates is a shadow between the surface of the backrest and him. And I want to point out the shadow is not simply on his shoulder; it's actually on the backrest as well. And the way you would get that kind of a shadow is if they're not flush together, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to try and do something like that. And if you look at the gorilla, it's not directly flush to this wood panel that it's nailed to. It's going, because it's a three-dimensional object, it's a jiggler, it's hanging a little bit away from the wood, it's going to have a little bit of that. There's going to be a separation, and it's going to create a shadow. So first, let's go ahead, and we're not going to put a super heavy outline around this like we would the figure, because if we do that, we're going to make it jump out. And we want the figures in the front to jump out and be the center of attention. There's so much detail in here. I think you can see it. And there's all kinds of toys. You can probably see here a TIE fighter. There's a Tauntaun. We've got back here in the way back, we've got my favorite sneakers, the Reeboks. We've got an NES lurking back there. We've got a Boglin up front. We've got books on the side, which I'll probably end up putting titles to. Down below here, kudos to you if you realize that's the helicopter from the old Adventure Team G.I. Joe, the set that was about the Mummy, had that. Back here we got an R2-D2, cowboy boots, so on and so on and so on. There's so much detail here, it's going to take me a long time to ink, but I want to use a much gentler touch. But for this guy, let's go ahead and start outlining him. And again, I will pop a picture of him, maybe an actual reference picture I use, because unfortunately I don't have this guy anymore. I would love to, and it's probably one of the things that I would love to find at a convention or an antique toy store, actually in the wild, and pick it up and bring it home. I know I can find one on eBay, but boy, it would be kind of just more fun to find one out in the wild. So what I'm doing right now is I'm merely outlining it. I'm not indicating any of these shadows that we talked about, that separation. That'll come in a minute. I remember those big, huge, bulky fingers that it had, and I mean, that's a bit of a theme. The jiggler hand puppets that were the inspiration for this guy and for his wife there also had oversized, big, bulbous fingers. You can see what I've done with him. I'll accentuate that more when I ink it. And with her fingers, her hands, big fingers, which again are just this perfect kind of style of the time. This monstrous, rubbery. I mean, I'm sure it's also probably mostly due to the mold. They can't do really fine fingers. They would rip off. And if they didn't rip off in the process of removing it from the mold, they most certainly would when kids got a hold of it. Not me. I was ridiculously gentle with my toys. Had most all of them until I was in my 20s, when I kind of got rid of them. We'll save that sob story for another day. But, whoops, missed a spot. So here we go. So let's start putting some of this in. Obviously, with we've been talking about using lines to suggest black, but there's also some black, just solid black, in these old undergrounds. So let's do that for the mouth. Okay, again, huge mouth. The crisscrossing, again, not what I'm doing right here is not suggesting cross-hatching like light and darkness. I'm actually trying to go for texture. This is kind of weird. This is not going to come up very much, right? Most of the things you draw are not going to have a rubbery waffle texture like this thing did. But we'll see if we can suggest that. Again, I'm going really light lines because I'm not trying to put anything in here suggesting really shadow. I'm just trying to get that crazy, crazy waffle pattern that this thing had that I remember so well. And I'm afraid if I put much more in there, and it did not extend all the way to the extremities, right? It just, that wouldn't work. So that's probably enough. We'll put that nail in there. And here's our first hint of separation. There's the nail head. And we're going to put just a dark circle around that, suggesting it's got a little bit of depth. And we're going to have our light kind of coming over from the left side of the screen, if you will. The reason for that, otherwise I'm not going to have any place to put any shadow, right? So then we're going to come in here, and I don't think I'm going to play around with creating the shadow with a lot of lines right now. I think I'm going to do a little bit more bold. And it looks like what I'm doing is outlining, but I'm not. Remember, all around this critter, this gorilla, this imperial gorilla from the 1970s that once belonged to a little boy who misses it dearly, there's going to be shadow because it's not quite flush against that wall. Now, I'm not going to do it over here because it wouldn't be casting a shadow there, right? It would be casting a shadow elsewhere. I'm going to do it behind the head, and I'm going to do it behind the arm, but not that way, because the sun would be coming down and from the side. So we've got a panel here which is at a 90-degree direction from this one, and the question is, would there be a little bit of shadow there? Well, maybe just a little. I don't know. Trying to reference in my head my physics classes from college. Maybe about that much. I think the gorilla's body would cover up anything else. Okay? So there you go. Hopefully you can see how that pops. It makes it just a little bit more three-dimensional. I think I will put a little bit of that shadow that we're talking about around this hand on the figure itself, because that would occur, right? It would cast a shadow on itself from the hand. Went a little too high with that, probably didn't want to, but that's okay. And maybe also underneath. Don't want to overdo it, but there you go. Maybe just a little on this side. All right, I think that works. We've got our jiggler hanging out there. Maybe a little, again, going with this idea of the shadows cast by itself on itself underneath that arm on the head. Make it look all the more monstrous. Yeah, I like it. Okay, good enough for now. See you tomorrow. There's a whole lot more in the Real Toy Chest of Doom. Gently tap the subscribe button to ensure that you're not shut out from any of the play. Cheers.